If you're looking to take your business's network security to the next level, a FortiGate may be one of the best options, as a unified threat management firewall combines advanced firewalling, intrusion prevention, network-level antivirus, and an intense web filter. There's a lot packed into this little box here, which can make it feel a little bit overwhelming at first, but that's where I come in. Today, we're giving you a crash course on configuring the FortiGate 70F specifically for small businesses. So whether you're replacing outdated equipment or building your network from scratch, we'll walk you through the key steps to create a secure, reliable network. So let's jump right in and secure your network the right way. FortiGate has an incredibly large product line, and if you need help selecting the right piece of hardware, don't hesitate to reach out to us here at Crosstalk Solutions, as we're FortiGate partners. We went with the FortiGate 70F here, as this is one of the smallest FortiGate models that supports the full suite of advanced features. Things like explicit proxy filtering and SSL decryption are generally reserved for their higher end models, but it is available on this one. If you want to get the most out of your FortiGate UTM subscription, you do want to ensure that your model can handle that SSL decryption. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But first, you should always check the datasheet of your FortiGate model prior to ordering. Unlike standard routers, UTM firewalls use a lot of CPU and RAM to process data. This means you shouldn't just assume that your model can handle the line rate of the data interface that's built into this unit. Take, for example, the 70F here. You can see that the IPS and next generation firewall throughput is over 1 gig per second. However, the threat protection is only 800 megabits per second. This is close enough to a gig for me. However, this may not be the best option for you. And if you're wondering, yes, FortiGate does work extremely well with unified switches and access points. That type of augmented network is very popular with our FortiGate customers. I'll be working on a separate video that continues the discussion we have today and kind of integrates it into the unified system, so stay tuned. But with all of that out of the way, let's jump right in and get this guy configured. Your FortiGate will come with this big sticker on the top of it telling you what IP address to set your computer to, what IP address you can reach the FortiGate at, and which port you need to plug into. In my instance here with the 70F, it's telling me to set my computer to 192.168.1.1 and then log into it at 192.168.1.99 using port 1. Now I plugged right into port 1 and it gave me a DHCP address, so I don't need to do that, but let's go ahead and get this configured. At 192.168.1.99, of course, we have to go through this process of accepting this, and the default credentials for this will be admin with no password. The first thing it's going to have me do here is change that password. It makes us sign in then with that password we just created, and it's going to bring you to a screen that looks something like this, where it asks you to register your device and will pull in all of the licensing that you have for your unit. I already did that, but we'll just go ahead and click begin. And of course, you have to make a decision here whether or not you want patches to be automatically made or if you want to do this on your own. I'm going to select disable for now. I like to be in control of my patches. And then it's going to ask us how we want our dashboard set up. I'm just going to leave it as optimal. We're going to configure a small business network. That means adding a couple networks. First, we're going to modify this management network away from 192.168.1. whatever. We're going to also create an employee network and create a guest network, so later on we can make some special firewalling to keep everything protected. Along the left-hand side of this dashboard is where you'll see all of the different options. And just a side note, if you're ever following a guide online and you're looking through here and it seems like there's an option that's not available, you need to go down into here, go into System, Feature Visibility, and you'll see from factory there's a lot of features that are disabled, and I know why they did this because that's a lot of information to put on this left-hand panel, so they just gave you the ones that are most common. But back to the network options, let's go ahead and configure our management interface here and add those VLANs in. So we'll go to Interface. You do see this FortiLink connection. Now this uses the ports A and B if you want to make like an LACP connection down to a switch below. We're going to keep this super simple. Of course, you'll see the DMZ port, WAN 1 and WAN 2, and then of course down here the internal interface. This VLAN switch is basically that group of ports on that side of the switch where you will be plugging most of your devices into. You can see here it's using the 192.168.1.99 subnet. Let's go ahead and change that first. Just click on it and click the little edit button and it will bring up all of the information. And this isn't to say that this is a bad subnet. My biggest gripe with this is I don't like the gateway sitting at .99. But for the sake of this video, let's go ahead and just change this subnet to 10.10.0.1. When you're configuring your interface and VLANs here, you got to make a decision if you want any type of management access. Because this is our management network, I do want to be able to access the HTTPS interface of our FortiGate as well as our SSH here. Down below, this interface is hosting a DHCP service. Because we updated that to a different subnet, we want to go ahead and update that here. Then we'll just go ahead and click OK because we don't need to modify any of the other sessions. It's giving us a warning saying, hey, you're logged into this device on that old IP address. Are you sure you want to do this? I am sure. Now that we made that change, we got to make sure that our computer got a new IP address in the new range and then go ahead and log into it on its new IP address. We'll click OK and then we'll get back to the network interfaces. And let's go ahead and just create the other VLANs while we're in here. Let's go ahead and click Create New Interface. And it's going to be type VLAN. So let's do employee. We have to select the root interface, which is going to be off that internal switch, and we'll give it VLAN ID 20. Then we'll just configure out the subnet right here. And because this is just an employee network, we don't want to enable any administrative access to the FortiGate. Let's go ahead and turn on the DHCP server and modify this range a little bit. Then we'll do those steps one more time to create our guest network, making sure we take care of the update, the VLAN ID, and the subnet. If we expand this little VLAN switch plus button, we can see our internal network, which is our management network, the employee network, and the guest network. If you want to hand these out, you'll likely want to have a switch below it, something like a Unify switch or a Fortinet switch. And effectively what you need to know is the way we set this up, it is sending that information down tagged. So on Unify, you'd want to make a third-party gateway network and put in the appropriate VLAN ID, and then you're free to hand this out on different SSIDs or port profiles. While we're talking about interfaces, let's go ahead and get the WAN set up. In our example here, we're going to have two WANs and we're going to put them into an SD-WAN group. Now, if you don't have two WANs at the moment, I'd still probably add them in the way I'm going to show you. And here's the reason. If they want to have a WAN later, I like to have that WAN 2 configured as a failover, so all they have to do is plug it right in. It's very easy to add in the SD-WAN interfaces now. It could be a little bit tricky later to do that, and let's talk about that. If you want to add a WAN network into an SD-WAN group, you have to make sure it's not being referenced anywhere else, basically in firewall rules or any other types of services. Let's take, for example, WAN 1. I have that plugged into an internet connection now, which is just my local lab network here. And you can see the whole way over onto the right-hand side, it's referenced once. If I went to the next step and tried to add this in as an SD-WAN interface, it's going to say, hey, you can't do that. It's referenced somewhere else. So let's click on this and see where it's referenced. And of course, it says the firewall policy here, which we can click edit. And this is just the basic firewall policy from the factory saying information that comes from the local LAN network can go out to the WAN. We'll create this later, but let's go ahead and delete this out. So we'll click back here under firewall policy and we'll see this implicit WAN, and let's just delete it out. Now this will drop my internet connectivity, but we'll get that restored in just a few minutes. If we go back to interfaces, we can see that the WAN now has no references. So we know we're good to add this into an SD-WAN pair. So we'll click on the SD-WAN here and you'll see there is some default information. You'll see a virtual WAN link. You'll see some performance SLAs, but let's go ahead and delete these out and we'll start from scratch and I'll show you how I like to do this. We got those SLAs deleted out. We can't quite delete out this SD-WAN role. That's fine. We'll come back to that. And let's go ahead and create a new SD-WAN member. Effectively, this is telling it that we want to use WAN 1 and WAN 2 as an SD-WAN link. Select WAN 1, and we might as well just put it into this SD-WAN zone that was already created. For the time being, we're not going to modify the cost or priority. We'll go ahead and click OK, and then we'll create one more SD-WAN member, and of course, we'll select WAN 2. One important thing to note is if you have a DHCP ISP, leave this gateway alone. It will find that information automatically. If you had a static ISP connection, you would put your gateway address here. Over at Performance SLAs, let's go ahead and create a new one, and we're going to call this Monitor Both Paths. This is going to be a ping monitor that pings out the Cloudflare and Quad 9, and based on that information of the ping, it will decide whether or not that's a good connection. We're going to modify the SLA target here to be a little bit more forgiving. Down below, we can actually configure when it decides a link is inactive or down. Basically, it's going to check it here at a 500 millisecond interval, and if there's 5 failure to pings, it goes ahead and considers that a bad link. And then, of course, it will restore that after it receives 5 consecutive good pings. Let's go ahead and click OK. And now we'll head over into the SD-WAN role to finalize this, and we'll click Create New, and we'll name this Use Optimal Link. Now that we have our interfaces set up and an SLA target that monitors how those interfaces are working, this is actually deciding, well, what are we doing with that traffic and what traffic are we sending? So in regards to what traffic are we sending, we choose here based on the destination address. For us, we're going to send all of our outbound traffic over this rule. And don't think of this as a firewall. This doesn't do any type of security. This is more of a routing rule than anything. You have a few different options on how it handles this type of traffic. For us, we're going to choose best quality. Now, because this is essentially a failover connection and not a load balance, what we want to do here is choose interface preference and select WAN 1 and WAN 2. Basically, the top down is the preferred order, and it's going to prefer WAN 1 over WAN 2, and then we selected the measure SLA path here to be our monitor both path rule. Let's go ahead and click OK. Now that we got the routing in place, we do got to take care of the firewall side to get our internet connectivity going. So all we need to do is go up to policies and objects and select firewall policy. Remember, we don't have anything here. We deleted out that single reference policy and we're going to add in basically a new one here. So let's go ahead and click create new. The first rule we're going to add here is allowing the internal management network out to the WAN. So we'll call this allow management to WAN. The incoming interface is that internal switch. Remember, that is the one we're considering the management network because that's where all of the other switches and access points will get their IP addresses by default if you plug into it. The outgoing interface is the SD-WAN virtual WAN link that we created. And we're not going to filter based on source and destination, so we're going to select these both to all. And the service, of course, will be all as well. Because this is a role going from LAN to WAN, you have to make sure NAT is enabled. Now, if you're going from LAN to LAN, let's say from the employee network to an IoT network or something, you don't want to have NAT running on that. But in this case here, we do want to have NAT running. Down below is actually where we can enable all of the different security profiles inside of your FortiGate. Now, this is the main claim to fame for FortiGate. It has all those antiviruses, web filters, DNS filters, all that fun stuff. To actually put them to work, you have to enable them across a firewall rule. In our case here, I'm going to enable all of the big ones. So antivirus, web filter, and DNS filter. Now you can modify these. You can have different levels of filtering for different use cases. Like in our school district client, it's not uncommon to let the students see less than the teachers. So we would make a student web filter and maybe a teacher web filter. The one thing I wanted to point out and I hinted to in the beginning of this video is SSL inspection. One thing this firewall can do is actually decrypt SSL traffic. I mean, think about it. Every single web page we go to today is HTTPS for our benefit. It makes sure nobody can do a man-in-the-middle attack and view the web page contents or get any of your private information. In an institutional environment, we may want to be able to decrypt that so we can actually use our filtering processes to their fullest extent. It's not super complicated to get this set up. Effectively, you just have to make an SSL profile and download a certificate, authority certificate that you deploy to all of the different PCs. Now, if you don't do that last part, what will happen is if you turn on SSL inspection, everybody on that network that's using that firewall rule will get that error. HTTPS is insecure, and they'll have to click advanced and then accept to go through every single web page because the FortiGate is being a man in the middle. When you deploy that certificate through something like Microsoft Intune, that will not happen at all because the PC knows to accept the FortiGate certificate instead of the websites. And this piece here is where a lot of the filtering happens. I mean, think about it. How would the firewall know if you're downloading a virus over HTTPS? It's encrypted. It can't see it, but it sure enough can infect your PC. There's plenty of documents out there of how to set that up, and if you do have any questions, that's generally a good discussion for us here at Crosstalk Solutions. As I said before, don't hesitate to reach out to us at Crosstalk Solutions if you're working on an enterprise environment that does need this SSL decryption. We'd be happy to work with you to get that set up. But these rules are not going to waste if I don't have SSL decryption set up. It's just not as effective. So let's go ahead and click OK. Now we have that rule set up and I got internet connectivity here to my PC, so I know that this network's good to go. And I only did this for the management network. Let me go ahead and do this for the other two networks. The reason I'm doing this on individual firewall rules is in the event I do want to have different security profiles for different uses. We'll actually go into modifying those next. With these rules added, I wanted to show you here that there is an implicit deny. Everything from FortiGate will get blocked unless you make an exception for it. That's a really good security practice. Think of it this way. We just added rules that will allow these individual networks out to the WAN. They will not be allowed to communicate internally. So if I needed some cross VLAN communication, I would have to add the exception. I really like this method of firewalling because it basically has a fail-safe mechanism built into it where if I didn't allow it to happen, it's not going to work. Now, this could be a little bit frustrating if you're new to this type of system because you have to go by hand and specify what traffic should be allowed to traverse the firewall. I like that. Now over to the security profiles. Let's take a look at a couple of the default ones. So under antivirus, if we click on default and click edit, we can show you what type of traffic it's going to go ahead and inspect. So HTTP, SMTP, POP3, IMAP, FTP, and CIFS is turned on. Now any traffic that goes over these protocols will be put through the antivirus scan effectively to see if there's something malicious inside. One thing to note is by default, it's going to block that traffic instead of just monitor and send you an alert. I like to not work reactive to this type of stuff. I'd rather just block it, and then if somebody has an issue, they come to me and we get it figured out. You can actually go down through these categories and modify them however you want. You could change them to allow, monitor, block, warning, or authenticate. Authenticate's kind of cool. You can add third-party SSO servers to authenticate with. So effectively, if you had like a G Suite or Office 365, you could allow certain users that whenever they see a block screen pop up to type in their SSO information and be allowed through based on their level of access. Every one of these security profiles is very similar on how it works. You can edit it, you can make new ones, you can whitelist things, you can blacklist certain things. They're super customizable. FortiGate does a great job with adding in new categories, new types of signatures, and keeping things really fresh and up to date. It's probably my favorite thing about FortiGate. I hope this was helpful to get your FortiGate small business setup up and running. As I said, if you have any FortiGate questions from sourcing hardware to maybe an enterprise project you'd like help with, don't hesitate to reach out to us at Crosstalk Solutions as we're FortiGate partners. Thanks for watching and subscribing to Crosstalk Solutions.